The door opened and my mother-in-law, Vivian, came in with angry eyes as I lay on the hospital bed, gasping for air from the agonizing pain of labor contractions. She lunged toward me and lifted her foot, aiming for my pregnant tummy. Before I could cry or shout for assistance, the door abruptly flew open once more, and the scene that unfolded was more startling than I could have ever dreamed. Greetings. I am Elena Parker, a 29-year-old. Through years of perseverance and hard work, I have developed my profession from the bottom up and currently hold the position of lead designer at a premium interior design business. But my story, the story of how my life changed forever, began 5 years ago when I was still trying to find my footing in this competitive world. I was living in Bloomville, a vibrant city known for its creative atmosphere and never-ending opportunities. Back then, my life was far from glamorous. I worked long hours as a junior designer, juggling endless projects, dealing with difficult clients, and constantly trying to prove myself. Mornings were a whirlwind of coffee, emails, and rushing to the office in heels that always seemed one step away from disaster. But as chaotic as life was, I held on to the hope that one day, my hard work would pay off. It was on one of those rushed mornings, when I was running late for an important client meeting, that fate decided to intervene. The autumn air was crisp, and the streets of Bloomville were buzzing with their usual morning frenzy. I was balancing a stack of design boards and sketches in one hand while clutching my coffee cup in the other. My phone buzzed in my bag, but before I could check it, I rounded a corner and collided with someone. The collision sent my papers flying, scattering across the pavement. "Oh no," I gasped, kneeling down to gather them, my heart pounding with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," I mumbled, barely looking up, as I frantically tried to pick up the mess. But then, a warm voice interrupted my panic. "Let me help you." I looked up and met the gaze of a man crouched beside me, handing me a few sheets of paper. He had warm brown eyes, a kind smile, and an effortlessly charming presence that made me pause for a moment. "Thank you," I said, accepting the papers from him. "It's no problem. Busy morning?" he asked, his smile widening as he noticed my frazzled state. "You have no idea," I replied with a breathless laugh. I adjusted the papers in my arms, trying to compose myself. "I'm Elena, by the way." "I'm Lucas Emerson," he said, extending his hand. When I shook it, I couldn't help but notice how warm and steady his grip was, a stark contrast to the chaos around us. "I think fate wanted us to meet today," he added. I raised an eyebrow, half amused and half intrigued. "Is that so?" He chuckled. "Well, you never know. Here's my card. If you'd like to continue this conversation over dinner sometime, give me a call." I hesitated for a moment, unsure if I should take the offer, but there was something about Lucas's easy charm that felt genuine. I slid the card into my bag, gave him a polite nod, and went on my way. That should have been the end of it, but something inside me wouldn't let it go. By the end of the day, I found myself pulling out Lucas's card and staring at it, my fingers hovering over the phone. Taking a deep breath, I dialed the number. "Hello," his voice came through the line, warm and familiar. "Hi, Lucas. It's Elena. I was wondering if your offer for dinner still stands." And just like that, we were connected again. We started seeing each other regularly, sharing late-night walks through the city, cozy dinners at small restaurants, and long conversations about our dreams. Lucas wasn't just kind. He was attentive, understanding, and supportive in ways that made me feel seen and valued. He would listen when I ranted about difficult clients and celebrate my small victories as if they were his own. Over time, I learned that Lucas came from a wealthy family, but he had built his own career in tech innovation without relying on his family's fortune. His humility impressed me, and the more I got to know him, the more I realized how deeply I cared for him. One rainy evening, after a particularly long week, Lucas showed up at my apartment with a bouquet of flowers and my favorite takeout. We sat on the floor, eating and laughing as the rain pattered against the windows. When we finished, he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "Alina," he said softly, "will you marry me?" Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded. "Yes," I whispered, barely able to speak through the overwhelming emotion. The following summer, we were married in a small outdoor ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. It was the happiest day of my life. The sun shone brightly, the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, and Lucas and I promised to stand by each other through every challenge life would throw our way. Little did I know, those challenges would arrive sooner than I expected. After our wedding, life felt like a dream. Lucas and I moved into a cozy yet elegant apartment in the heart of Bloomville, decorated with a blend of modern and vintage touches that reflected our shared tastes. Lucas continued his work as a rising star in the tech innovation industry, while I focused on advancing my career in interior design. We spent our evenings cooking together, binge-watching mystery dramas, and planning for the future. Everything seemed perfect until a small, life-changing surprise came our way. It happened one morning when I felt unusually tired and nauseous. At first, I thought it was just the result of a busy work schedule, but when the symptoms persisted for days, I decided to take a pregnancy test. My heart raced as I waited for the result, and when the 2 pink lines appeared, I stared at them in disbelief. I was pregnant. Excitement and nervousness swirled within me as I dialed Lucas's number. "Can you come home early today? I have something important to tell you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Of course," he replied, sounding concerned but supportive as always. "I'll be there as soon as I can." When he arrived, I could barely contain my emotions. We sat on the couch, and I handed him a small box. Inside was a tiny pair of baby booties and the positive pregnancy test. His eyes widened, and a smile slowly spread across his face. "We're going to be parents," I whispered, tears pooling in my eyes. Lucas pulled me into a warm embrace, his voice trembling with emotion. This is the best news I could have ever hoped for. I love you, Alina." We spent the rest of the evening talking about names, nursery designs, and the kind of parents we wanted to be. I felt a deep sense of joy and hope for the future. But there was one thing lingering in the back of my mind. How would Lucas's mother, Vivian, react? A few months later, when I was around 4 months pregnant, we went to the doctor for the first ultrasound. I was lying on the examination table, Lucas holding my hand, when the sound of our baby's heartbeat filled the room. It was fast and steady, like a tiny drumbeat, and tears streamed down my face as I listened. The doctor smiled and pointed to the screen. "Would you like to know the baby's gender?" Lucas and I exchanged a glance and nodded eagerly. "It's a girl." The words filled me with warmth. I had always dreamed of having a daughter, someone I could share secrets with and watch grow into a strong, independent woman. Lucas grinned and kissed my forehead. "Our little girl," he said softly. "She's going to be amazing." Later that evening, As we sat on the couch with the ultrasound photo in hand, Lucas suggested that we share the news with his mother. I hesitated, remembering her traditional views on family and gender roles. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" I asked, biting my lip. "What if she doesn't take it well?" Lucas sighed. "She'll come around once she sees how much this baby means to us. She won't be able to resist." I wasn't so sure, but I agreed. The next weekend, we visited Vivian's large estate, a grand mansion filled with antique furniture and a sense of cold formality that always made me feel out of place. We sat in the living room, sipping tea, and I could feel the tension building in my chest. "Mom, we have some wonderful news," Lucas said, reaching for my hand. "Alina is pregnant. We're having a baby girl." For a moment, Vivian said nothing. Her eyes narrowed as she set her teacup down with a loud clink. "A girl?" she repeated, her tone icy. "Yes," I said, forcing a smile. "We're very excited." Her lips pressed into a thin line. The successor to the family legacy should be a boy. What's the point of a girl? Lucas's jaw tightened, but he remained calm. "Mom, it's 2025. Times have changed. A girl can be just as capable of carrying on the family name." Vivian scoffed. "Don't lecture me on what's changed. I know what's best for this family, and a girl isn't it." Her words cut deep, but I kept my composure. "Our daughter will be loved and supported, regardless of your opinion," I said firmly. Vivian's glare shifted to me. "You think you know everything, don't you? Let me tell you something. You've already failed this family by not giving us a son." I felt Lucas's grip tighten on my hand, silently urging me to stay calm. "That's enough, Mom," he said, his voice low but firm. "We're leaving." We walked out of the mansion in silence, the weight of her words pressing down on me like a heavy blanket. As soon as we got into the car, I broke down, tears streaming down my face. Lucas pulled me into his arms. "Don't listen to her," he whispered. "We'll protect our daughter no matter what. She'll be safe and loved." But despite his comforting words, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a long battle. As my pregnancy progressed, life became a mixture of joy and anxiety. By the time I was 6 months along, my belly had grown round and firm, making it difficult to move around as easily as before. But despite the physical challenges, I felt a deep sense of connection to my baby. Every time she kicked, it reminded me of the precious life growing inside me. Lucas continued to be my rock, always finding ways to support me. He'd wake up early to make breakfast, clean the house, and make sure I had everything I needed. Sometimes he'd come home from work with little gifts: a book about parenting, a box of chocolates, or a soft blanket for the baby. His excitement was infectious, and it helped me stay positive despite the storm brewing in the background. And that storm was Vivian. She wasn't happy about the baby being a girl, and she made sure we knew it. At first, it started with snide comments during family gatherings. "I suppose you'll be raising her to take over the family business," she'd say with a sarcastic laugh. Lucas always defended me, but her words lingered, making me doubt whether she'd ever accept our daughter. Then her behavior escalated. She began calling Lucas at work multiple times a day, demanding that he convince me to try again for a boy. She even showed up at our apartment unannounced, criticizing everything from the nursery color to my parenting plans. One day, I was at work, finalizing a design project for a major client, when the receptionist called me. "Alina, there's a woman here asking for you. She says she's your mother-in-law." My heart sank. "Tell her I'm in a meeting," I replied quickly, but it was too late. I heard her voice before I saw her. Vivian marched into the office, ignoring the receptionist's protests. My colleagues stared as she pointed a finger at me. "You think you can hide from me?" she yelled. "I'm not leaving until you understand how serious this is." I felt my face flush with embarrassment as I led her into a private conference room. "What are you doing here, Vivian?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I'm trying to save this family," she snapped. "You're too busy playing career woman to realize the damage you're causing. A girl can't carry on the family legacy. Quit your job and focus on giving us a son." I stared at her in disbelief. "You want me to quit my job? And what if I don't have a son? Will you keep harassing me until I do?" She crossed her arms, her gaze cold. "If you won't do what's best for the family, then maybe you don't belong in it." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let her see me break. "Lucas and I are happy with our daughter," I said firmly. "You don't get to decide our future." Vivian scoffed. "Then don't come crying to me when your daughter grows up to be a disappointment." Before I could respond, the door opened and my boss walked in. "Mom, this is a workplace," he said firmly. "You need to leave now." Vivian shot me one last glare before turning on her heel and storming out. I sank into the chair, my hands trembling as the weight of her words crushed me. My boss sat down beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay, Alina?" I nodded, wiping away the tears. "Thank you for stepping in." He smiled kindly. "Take the rest of the day off. You need some time to breathe." I left the office and went straight home, where Lucas was waiting for me. As soon as I saw him, the tears I had been holding back poured out. I told him everything, from her demands that I quit my job to her hurtful comments about our daughter. Lucas's face darkened with anger. "This has to stop," he said, pulling me into a comforting embrace. "I'm calling her right now." He grabbed his phone and dialed Vivian's number. When she picked up, his voice was firm and steady. "Enough, Mom. I won't let you hurt Alina like this anymore. She's my wife, and we're having this baby girl. If you can't accept that, you'll be the one cut out of our lives." I listened as he defended me, and for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. But Vivian wasn't the type to back down easily. Her harassment continued, and the stress began to take a toll on my health. I started having trouble sleeping, and the emotional strain made it difficult to focus on work. One evening, after Lucas had gone to bed, I sat on the couch, rubbing my belly as I tried to relax. My phone buzzed, and I groaned when I saw Vivian's name on the screen. I ignored the call, but a few minutes later, there was a knock on the door. My heart raced as I peered through the peephole and saw her standing there. I opened the door. "What do you want, Vivian?" "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice unusually calm. "Please, Elena, just hear me out." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the couch, looking around the room as if she were inspecting it. "Lucas is too blinded by love to see reason," she began, "but you're smarter than that. You know what's at stake here." I folded my arms. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" She leaned forward, her eyes piercing mine. "Abort the baby. Try again for a boy. It's not too late." My stomach turned, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "You're asking me to kill my baby." "I'm asking you to save this family," she said coldly. I stood up, trembling with rage. "Get out of my house." Vivian stood, unfazed by my anger. "Think about what I said," she replied, before walking out the door. I locked the door behind her and collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. Lucas found me there when he woke up, and when I told him what had happened, his face hardened with determination. "We're done with her," he said. "I don't care if she's my mother. She's crossed the line." By the time I reached the 9th month of my pregnancy, the physical and emotional toll of the past few months had left me exhausted. The weight of my growing belly made it difficult to move around, and the stress from Vivian's constant harassment had only made things worse. Lucas tried his best to shield me, cutting off communication with his mother and making sure I stayed as comfortable as possible. But deep down, I knew that Vivian wasn't finished. She had always been relentless. Despite everything, Lucas and I stayed focused on preparing for our daughter's arrival. The nursery was ready, painted in soft lavender with fairy lights strung across the ceiling. We had a crib set by the window and shelves filled with baby books and stuffed animals. Every evening, Lucas would sit beside me, talking to our baby and rubbing my belly as we imagined what life would be like once she arrived. "I can't wait to meet her," Lucas whispered one night, resting his head gently on my belly. "She's lucky to have you as her dad," I replied, stroking his hair. "And I'm lucky to have you by my side." 3 days before my due date, I woke up in the middle of the night with a sharp pain in my lower abdomen. At first, I thought it was just another round of Braxton Hicks contractions. But when the pain didn't subside, I realized this was different. My water had broken. "Lucas," I called out, struggling to sit up. He bolted out of bed, half-dressed and panicking. As he helped me to my feet, it was time. He asked, his voice a mixture of excitement and fear. I nodded, breathing through the pain. "We need to get to the hospital," he said. He quickly grabbed the hospital bag we had packed weeks earlier and guided me to the car. "Don't worry, Elena. You've got this," he said, holding my hand as he drove. "Just breathe." When we arrived at the hospital, the staff immediately admitted me to a private room. The contractions were getting stronger, and I clung to Lucas's hand as the nurses checked my vitals. Everything was moving so fast, and I could barely keep up with the flurry of activity around me. After a while, one of the nurses informed us that it could take several more hours before the baby was ready to be delivered. Lucas kissed my forehead and said, "I'm going to step out for a few minutes to grab some water and talk to the doctor, but I'll be right back." I nodded, squeezing his hand. "Hurry back." As he left the room, I closed my eyes and focused on breathing through the pain. But before I could fully relax, the door creaked open again. I expected to see a nurse or Lucas, but my blood ran cold when I saw Vivian standing there. "How did you get in here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I have my ways," she said, closing the door behind her. She stood at the foot of my bed, her gaze cold and calculating. "I heard you were about to give birth, so I thought I'd stop by and make sure you understand the consequences of your actions." "Leave, Vivian," I said firmly, my heart racing. "You're not welcome here." She ignored me and stepped closer. "You're making a mistake, Elena. This baby, this girl, is going to ruin everything. Lucas deserves better." Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let her see me break. "Lucas loves our daughter, and so do I. Nothing you say will change that." Vivian's expression twisted with rage. "Then you leave me no choice." Before I could react, she lunged forward and kicked me in the stomach. Pain exploded through my body, and I cried out, clutching my belly as tears streamed down my face. But just as quickly as it happened, the door burst open and a nurse and security guard rushed in. "Step away from her," the nurse shouted, pushing Vivian back. The security guard grabbed Vivian by the arms and restrained her as she thrashed and yelled. "Let go of me. I'm doing what's best for this family. You could have killed her baby," the nurse screamed, checking my vitals and helping me lie back down as I sobbed. Lucas rushed into the room, his eyes wide with horror. "Alina." He ran to my side, taking my hand in his. "Are you okay? What happened?" I could barely speak through the pain. She kicked me." Lucas's face darkened with rage as he turned to Vivian, who was still struggling against the security guard. "How could you do this?" he demanded. "She's your grandchild. She's a mistake." Vivian spat. "I was trying to protect this family." Lucas pulled out his phone and dialed the police. "I'm reporting an assault on a pregnant woman," he said, his voice cold and steady. Within minutes, the police arrived, and Vivian was handcuffed and escorted out of the hospital. She continued screaming as they dragged her away, but I barely heard her. My world had narrowed to the sound of Lucas's voice and the steady rhythm of the baby monitor. "You're safe now," Lucas whispered, kissing my forehead. "I'm not going to let anything happen to you or our baby." After Vivian was taken away by the police, the chaos in the room began to settle. The nurse wiped my tears and checked my vitals again. "You're stable," she reassured me. "But we need to monitor you closely to ensure the baby isn't under any distress." I nodded weakly, my hands still trembling. Lucas was by my side, holding my hand tightly, as if he feared letting go would somehow make things worse. "You're strong, Alina. We've made it through so much. You can do this," he whispered, his voice gentle yet firm. A few hours later, the labor reached its peak, and the room filled with doctors and nurses ready to help me deliver our baby. The contractions were relentless, and the pain consumed me, but Lucas never left my side. His encouraging words kept me going through every push, every wave of exhaustion, and every moment I felt like giving up. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the sound of our baby's first cry filled the room. "She's here," Lucas said, tears streaming down his face as he kissed my forehead. The doctor gently placed the baby on my chest, and I stared down at her, overwhelmed by the purest love I had ever felt. She was so tiny, her little fists curled against me, her eyes closed as she whimpered softly. "Hello, my sweet Aria," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Welcome to the world." Lucas leaned over and kissed both of us. "You did it, Alina. She's perfect." We stayed like that for a while, savoring the moment and forgetting the chaos that had preceded it. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt truly at peace. A few days later, we were discharged from the hospital and returned to our apartment. Lucas had prepared everything for our homecoming. Aria's crib was ready, the nursery was spotless, and there were fresh flowers on the kitchen counter. My heart swelled with gratitude as I walked into the warmth of our home, holding Aria close to me. But despite the joy of bringing our baby home, the events at the hospital still haunted me. Vivian's words echoed in my mind, and the memory of her kick sent shivers down my spine. Lucas noticed my anxiety and wrapped his arms around me. One evening, as we sat on the couch, he said softly, "We need to make sure she pays for what she's done." I nodded. She could have taken everything from us. Lucas's expression hardened. "She won't get away with this." We contacted our family lawyer the next morning and filed charges for assault and endangerment of a pregnant woman. The hospital security footage, the nurse's testimony, and my medical report all served as evidence against Vivian. The case was solid, and even though part of me dreaded the thought of seeing her in court, I knew it was necessary. A few weeks later, the court proceedings began. I sat beside Lucas, my hands clenched tightly in my lap, as the prosecutor laid out the events of that night. The security footage played on the screen, showing Vivian lunging at me, and the moment the security guard restrained her, I couldn't bear to watch, so I focused on Lucas's hand in mine, drawing strength from his presence. The nurse testified about how Vivian's actions had put both me and the baby at risk, and the judge listened carefully, his expression grave. Vivian's lawyer tried to paint her as a concerned grandmother who had acted out of emotional distress. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. The security footage didn't lie, and neither did the medical report that showed how close I had come to losing Aria that night. After several days of testimony and arguments, the judge delivered the verdict. I held my breath as he spoke. The court finds Vivian Emerson guilty of assault on a pregnant woman with intent to cause bodily harm. Considering the severity of the offense and the risk posed to both the mother and child, the court sentences the defendant to 5 years in prison with no possibility of early parole. A wave of relief washed over me as I exhaled, tears streaming down my face. Lucas pulled me into his arms, and for the first time in months, I felt like we could finally move on. Justice had been served. Leaving the courtroom that day, I felt lighter, as if the weight of Vivian's hatred had finally been lifted from my shoulders. Lucas and I returned home, where Aria was waiting for us with her nanny. I picked her up and held her close, marveling at how peaceful she looked. "We did it," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "We're safe now." Lucas came up behind me and wrapped his arms around us. "We have everything we need right here," he said softly. "You, me, and Aria. This is our family." Over the next few weeks, life began to settle into a new routine. Late-night feedings, diaper changes, and lullabies became our world. And every time I looked at Aria, I was reminded of how strong we had been to protect her. Lucas leaned over to give me a kiss one evening when we were sitting on the couch and Aria was sleeping in my arms. His words, "We've survived so much. I know we can handle anything that comes our way." I put my head on his shoulder and grinned. As long as we're together, we can. With that, we put an end to a traumatic past and welcomed a future full of love, harmony, and fresh starts.